So now we're going to move on to our basic income presentation, and I'll just give you a little bio for our speaker, Elizabeth K. Rainbird. We call her Mandy. And Mandy is an anti-poverty advocate and chair of Basic Income Nova Scotia, and a member of the Coalition Canada Basic Income Revenue de Base, as well as a retired professor of the School of Communication Sciences and Disorders at Dalhousie University, a certified speech language pathologist. Her research and teaching is focused various aspects of cultural and linguistic diversity, including bilingualism in children and youth with and without language disorders. And we are so very grateful to Mandy for being our speaker presenter today, and I'm sure there'll be a wonderful opportunity for questions following her presentation. So thank you, Mandy.
Thank you. So I have a few slides. For those of you who've seen me present before, you know that I depend upon my slides. So I'm waiting for, I'm viewing Maureen's screen right now. And once I have control of the screen, I'll move ahead. Good. Okay. Thank you very much, Maureen. I want to thank the Basic Income Now Atlantic Canada group for asking me to present on basic income. Some of you may have seen me present before, and so will recognize some of the information that I'm providing today. As Darlene said, Basic Income Now Atlantic Canada is a coalition of people speaking with one voice to advocate for a basic income. We developed a consensus statement that currently has 41 organizations across Atlantic Canada and 274 individuals signed up to support it. And if you have not done so, you can go to the Basic Income Nova Scotia website and do so today. Everybody deserves a life where they don't have to choose between what bill gets paid this month. Everybody deserves a life where you matter, even if you are not rich. This is the belief of our group. I'm going to talk about what the basic income is that we are advocating for, and our definition and principles are consistent with those of Basic Income Nova Scotia, Coalition Canada Basic Income, and Basic Income Canada Network. The definition is that it is a regular payment made to people who need it and distributed with minimal bureaucracy. A basic income is an essential component of a just society, but must not replace the social supports and services that currently exist, and which in many cases should themselves be strengthened. We have identified 7 principles of a basic income. The first one is that it be universally accessible. That is, everyone who needs it gets it. The second is that it be unconditional, subject only to income and residency requirements. The third is that it be an essential component of a broad safety net, as I mentioned before, and not replace other vital social programs which in themselves may need enhancement. Excuse me. The fourth principle is that it be sufficient, set at a livable level above the poverty line. The fifth is that it be responsive to changing circumstances. So it must be simple to access and delivered monthly or biweekly. That it be respectful of autonomy is the next principle, payable to individuals to be used at their sole discretion with no demeaning and degrading oversight. And the final principle is that it be respectful of Indigenous self-determination. It must respect the autonomy and rights of Indigenous people to determine whether a basic income is delivered in their communities, and if so, what form it will take and how it will be implemented. So just to summarize, A basic income would not be for everyone. It would be for those who need it. It would not be a replacement of other social services, but it would complement other social services. It would not be means tested. Therefore, there would be no intrusive, onerous, demeaning, stigmatizing requirements or conditions. And the maximum benefit would be provided to those with the lowest incomes, gradually reduced as earned income rises. Many elected officials of all parties, as was mentioned in the videos, support a basic income. These are just some of the people who have and are now supporting a basic income. Former MP Wayne Easter is going to be speaking with us later today, and Kim Pate will be participating on the panel. Both Leah Gazan and Kim Pate, as you know, have introduced parallel bills calling for the development of a framework to move or to describe how a basic income could be implemented. You may not know that Robert Stanfield in 1968 was calling for a basic income to replace income assistance programs across Canada that he felt were inadequate and demeaning. I don't have time to play this video, but I urge you to look it up and watch it yourself. Indigenous leaders support a basic income. As was discussed earlier, PEI is calling for a province-wide basic income program. It has all party support. It also has support of the Mi'kmaq Confederacy of PEI and of both First Nations chiefs in PEI. We are lucky today to have Lennox Island Chief Darlene Bernard here to speak on the panel. And the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls calls for justice also called for basic income, both for all Canadians and for there to be a development of a basic income program that would be appropriate for Inuit people in the North. Municipal leaders support a basic income. We've heard from Mayor Savage today, and we'll hear from Waye Mason later. They support a basic income, as Mayor Savage said, because poverty impacts our communities and the costs of poverty are downloaded onto municipalities. And this is discussed in a case for basic income in municipalities that was recently developed. As was mentioned, a number of cities, municipalities across the country are calling on the implementation of a basic income, and these include the City of Victoria and also the Union of BC municipalities in British Columbia, and an increasing number of municipalities here in the Atlantic provinces, starting with Halifax and quickly followed by Moncton, St. John's, Fredericton, and others are coming. I'm going to talk now briefly about why we need a basic income, or maybe not so briefly. Okay, we need a basic income, as Mayor Savage said, because poverty rates are high. On the left-hand side of the screen, you can see the rates of child poverty in the Atlantic provinces. Unacceptable even with the CCB. On the right-hand side, you can see many of the vulnerable groups that are most affected by poverty. These include, in this slide, Indigenous people off reserve, recent immigrants, people with disabilities, single parents, and perhaps surprising to many of you, unattached adults who are between the ages of 45 and 64, which is the highest bar on the right-hand side of that screen. A consensus statement signer said, "Allow me to live, not just survive." And that's what a basic income would do. Racism and colonial practices have caused very high poverty rates in Indigenous and Black communities. And you can see those poverty rates shown here for Nova Scotia and will be mirrored across the country. As Wayne talked about, introducing unconditional income supports like old age security and guaranteed income supplements dramatically reduces poverty, as it did for him. So you can, if you look at the green line on the figure here, you can see the impact of introducing those supports for people 65 and older. Rapid decline in poverty rates, and now poverty in people 65 and older is less, in fact, than other age groups in Canada. We need a basic income because it is the most impactful social determinant of health. Income determines whether you can buy healthy food, as Wayne said, pay for housing, pay for education, etc. As Hugh Siegel stated, poverty is the best predictor of early illness, early hospitalizations, longer hospital stays, and earlier death. It is a reliable predictor of substance abuse, food insecurity, poor education outcomes, and for some, trouble with the law. We need a basic income because poverty is costly. It's costly in human suffering, human potential, and in dollars, as is shown here in a recent report by the CCPA on the cost of living in the Atlantic provinces. Indeed, they estimated that the cost of poverty, the unnecessary cost of poverty, is over $4.5 billion per year in the Atlantic provinces. We need a basic income because a basic income would save money and improve people's trust and quality of life. As Mayor Savage mentioned, studies of the Mincome Project in Manitoba showed that hospital visits reduced by 8.5% when people had a basic income. Violent and property crimes in another study of the Mincome Project were shown to reduce by 17.5%. Stress reduces and trust in government increases, as was shown in the Finland pilot recently. We need a basic income because income assistance or welfare is not sufficient, as was demonstrated in the talk by Wayne McNaughton. It is not sufficient and it is demeaning. These four figures show that income assistance for unattached single people, either with or without a disability, are below the deep poverty line, which is the gray lines, and well below the poverty lines for all of our provinces. And of course, for First Nations communities, social assistance programs are inequitable relative to the provinces that they are in, and have been historically and currently underfunded by the federal government. Here's a comment that speaks to what my colleague Kendall Worth would call the bureaucratic nonsense that's involved in income assistance means testing. It says, I have panic attacks having to feel belittled every year at their annual reviews. I worry I may get something wrong or mess up how I spend. I don't even know if I'm allowed to buy products on Amazon where I have no vehicle and use vitamins for my health. I am mentally and physically disabled. Poverty is a policy choice, and we can choose differently, and we should choose differently. A federally funded and administered basic income would dramatically reduce poverty and treat people with dignity. Another reason why a basic income is important is because 24% of jobs in Canada are precarious. This means that they are temporary or they are involuntary involuntary part-time jobs or self-employed jobs. These are 2016 data, but the numbers have only increased since then. When you're on precarious work, you're often one paycheck away from poverty. Seasonal work is a case in point. Seasonal workers are precarious workers. A recently developed case for the fisheries and basic income discussed how a basic income could support Indigenous and non-Indigenous workers and their communities. So I urge you to access that case and read it. We need a basic income because not all work is paid work, and yet it's important work for our communities. And some of that work is pictured here. In summary, a basic income would give people economic security, let people take risks, give people choices. And we need it because there's considerable support for a basic income. 65% of Atlantic Canadians support a basic income, and open letters from a variety of groups, including senators, youth, artists, church leaders, health professionals, CEOs, are calling for a basic income. I'm going to now address 3 myths about a basic income very quickly. The first is that people want work. The second is that we can't afford it. And the third is that government spending causes inflation. Myth 1, people want work. It's not true. There's no research to show that people who receive a basic income do not work. In fact, as Darlene said, people want to work. And in fact, a basic income would incentivize work because the benefit declines gradually with paid work. Research, as was mentioned by others from the Mencom pilot, showed employment changed little. The only people who worked less were people who stayed in school or continued on in upper education, or people who chose to provide care for their family members. The Finland pilot project showed that employment actually increased in people who received a basic income, though slightly. And a very interesting study that has come recently out of the Netherlands shows that when there's less demeaning oversight, more people find permanent work. Myth number 2, we can't afford it. It is the case that a basic income costs a lot of money. A 2018 PBO study, Parliamentary Budget Office study, showed that the gross cost of a basic income at that time would cost about $76 billion. That would be offset by current spending that could be folded in to a basic income, and the net cost then would be $24 billion. $24 billion, that's a lot of money. But consider the cost savings from health, policing and incarceration, and other costs of poverty that we've talked about already. Consider the economic benefits of a basic income. For example, a study that was done by Councillor on the Canada Child Benefit showed that the economic activity generated by that benefit is almost twice the size of the payments themselves. And consider that people who are receiving a basic income would spend their money not elsewhere, but right in their local communities, supporting those local communities and supporting the businesses within them. Also consider that we make other expensive decisions. This is what we do in government. And consider that we make expensive tax choices as well. On the right-hand side of the screen, you can see that from the year 2000 to the year 2012, the tax rate, the corporate tax rate, fell from 28% to 15%. A CCPA analysis suggested that for every 1% cut in corporate taxes, the federal government loses $2 billion in annual revenue. That was an expensive choice. We could choose differently. This screen, I don't have time to go over it rapidly, but go over it fully. But this screen shows that the PBO has done other analyses of the costs of basic income. But this has also been done by academics and by Basic Income Canada Network and UBI Works. While the net cost of a basic income was proposed to be deficit spending by the PBO reports, these other reports suggest that basic income could be revenue neutral if we focus on income redistribution and tax changes that lead to a more progressive tax system. These are policy choices. We could choose to fund a basic income. Myth number 3, government spending causes inflation. We're all struggling with inflation right now. Canada food prices are going up rapidly, as are oil prices. But as these pictures show, oil companies have their profits have soared over the same period of time as have the profits of Canadian banks. On the other hand, when OAS and GIS, or when the Canada Child Benefit were introduced, they did not lead to inflation. That government spending did not lead to inflation. In fact, a report by KPMG suggested that the inflation that we're experiencing today is driven by strong demand, post-pandemic economic recovery, geopolitical unrest, and supply chain disruptions. I would also suggest it might involve some corporate greed as well. And so perhaps one answer to consider for inflation is corporate tax reforms. I'm going to close with a final comment from a consensus statement signer. Give people the means to support themselves, and they will. Give people the means to eat healthier and become more active, all of which costs money, and they will. I urge you to work together, cooperate, collaborate, and make a basic income happen now. Thank you very much.